the instructor was like, I think he thought he was comforting me, and he was like, do you get claustrophobic? And I do. And he was not expecting me to say yes. And so when I was like, yes, I do. He was like, oh, well, then this will be perfect for you. And I was like, this is such a lie.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Until Saturday. I am your host, David Ubben, here joined by two of my favorites at The Athletic, Manny Navarro, one of our ACC experts and living, breathing Florida man, without all the crazy, but some of the crazy, and Grace Raynor, who has been sorely missed in the feed. We haven't heard from you much, Grace, because you got married. Congratulations to Grace. Mostly congratulations for being back on the feed. You can tell us what is the bigger pride point of your summer, being on this episode or getting married. But we're going to have you back. We'll hear more about your trip to Asia and married life. We'll spend 60, 90 minutes on that. But before then, we have Meek joining us. Our Michigan writer, here to talk about Sherrone Moore's press conference, the looming notice of allegations. Just a heads up, that could be dropping at any point. We're going to keep an eye on that. So we could have some breaking news there. Austin, I suppose I have to ask you if you've deleted any incriminating texts lately, or if you are looking forward to any of those becoming public.
I plead the fifth on that. I am not going to cooperate with this witch hunt that you're attempting here, David. But if my text became public, it would be like a lot of texts with my wife about like picking up our kids at camp. So it would be the most boring stuff you have ever read, I'm sure. Well,
if you refuse to cooperate with this investigation, you might end up an NFL head coach. So I would caution you to not do that. And then, of course, we'll close the show with Manny, Grace, and I introducing you to our all sleeper squads. We've got two sleeper teams and players that you need to know about this year. And finally, some discussion of the Athletics Heisman Draft and why my team is the best. Manny also drafted. We had a few of our other experts, and Grace will weigh in. Hopefully that check hit for Grace to vote for my team and to feel good about that. So with that said, let's get to it. A lot going on in Michigan, and Austin Meek has been on the ground covering all of that. Austin, we'll get into some of that later. Your story on sort of it's about the cheeseburger, but not really about the cheeseburger. It's about kind of this whole situation and how we kind of got here was great. But fast forward, Sherrone Moore met with the media on Monday, kind of had a brief response about the NCAA's draft, Big D draft with quotation marks, draft of the notice of allegations related to the Connor Stalions scandal. And here's kind of what he said about what's going on.
I'll just say this is that I look forward to them being released, and that's it.
I suppose it begs the question of if you're looking forward to texts becoming public, why you would delete them. But these are questions neither here nor that. He sounds confident that his deleted texts with Stalions are not damning for him or the program. But Austin, you were there. You were seated, I assume, front row. What did you make of Sherrone Moore's time at the podium, sort of addressing this scandal that won't go away and is getting sort of less funny and more annoying by the day?
Yeah, he gave more substantive answers in that press conference than I expected. I thought his answer about looking forward to the text messages becoming public was at least a little bit revealing. I interpreted that to mean basically he doesn't think there's anything in those text messages that looks bad or would be incriminating for him. Of course, it does raise the question, well, why did he delete them? Now, I am like the least tech savvy person in the world. My understanding is that people can like set text to delete automatically on their phones after a certain period of time. And perhaps that was something that happened with Sherrone Moore. I don't know. I don't know how it happened that those texts got deleted. I think it's also possible that just in the moment, there was a lot of panic there and nobody wanted anything tying them to Connor Stalions as soon as it became clear that he was going to be the central figure in all of this. But anyway, I think the message from Sherrone Moore is like, there's nothing in those text messages that's going to be a smoking gun. And I tend to kind of agree with him on that, just from the standpoint that if in fact he only gets a level 2 charge from the NCAA, I have to think if there was anything in those text messages tying him into having knowledge about Connor Stalions' scouting scheme, that he probably would have gotten something more severe than a level 2 allegation in that draft from the NCAA.
Austin, as a guy who is also married with kids and texts his wife quite a bit about pickup drop-off situations, I don't delete any text messages. So I kind of use it as evidence for whenever my wife yells at me. I'll say, no, look at the phone. This is exactly what you said.
Man. You got to keep a record of that stuff.
Yeah, so I wouldn't even know how to set it to like automatically delete. That'd be against like just my thinking in general.
Mine are set that way.
You have them deleted, Grace?
Yeah, I have them delete every 30 days, mainly for like storage purposes, but it's just in your settings. Yeah. But I don't know. He'd have to have some pretty incredible timing for the 30-day to be on that day.
Yeah. I don't know what he would have on there anyway. I would assume most of that would be spoken word, right? Of whatever rules they broke. But as a guy who covered the Nevin Shapiro scandal at Miami with Al Golden, this situation's a little different. Al Golden got the job, inherited the Nevin Shapiro scandal, and that was a mess. Sherrone Moore was actually involved in this, being on the staff. So I guess my question to you is Moore kind of getting a raw deal at all just because he wasn't the head coach in charge? Or how do you sort of feel about that because he was on staff already?
Yeah, I mean, there is an element of this where Sherrone Moore is the guy who's going to have to clean up the mess from a lot of things that happened before he was the head coach. But the fact that he was on the staff and that he was part of this, it's not like when a new head coach comes in and can just kind of, throw the old regime under the bus and, say, oh yeah, all that stuff happened on somebody else's watch. That wasn't me. Sherrone Moore's in kind of a weird position where he does have to kind of defend the stuff that happened before he was the head coach. And he sort of did that this week where he came out and had very nice things to say about Jim Harbaugh, had strong statements vouching for the culture of the program, which is partly his culture, right? Sherrone Moore was part of building that culture. So he's not going to come out and say, oh yeah, we need to make some big changes here. Like, the way we were doing things before, that's not going to fly anymore. That's not what you're going to hear from Sherrone Moore. In fact, he said, essentially, we're not going to change a thing with how this program is run because it's working for us. And that's certainly there's some tension there to say that in the midst of these NCAA allegations and the stuff that's coming out about things that happened when Jim Harbaugh was the head coach. So I suspect that Sherrone Moore is probably privately, internally distancing himself from some things in a way that he won't publicly. But I don't think you will hear Sherrone Moore come out and say a negative word at all about how the program was run when Jim Harbaugh was the head coach.
Austin, I want to ask you, off-field stuff aside, just what the vibe has been like in Ann Arbor. Obviously, we're all looking at the quarterback situation. You and I were chatting a little bit offline. Orji, Tuttle, Warren. Just what's your read on what's going on there?
Yeah, I think the indications are that Alex Orji is the front runner to be Michigan's starting quarterback, and that's been the expectation really, I think, since back in the spring. But there also was a little bit of unknown just because Jack Tuttle was hurt in the spring and wasn't part of that competition. So I think that the coaching staff wanted to see what Jack Tuttle brought when he was healthy and able to go full speed. I think the quarterback thing could be an ongoing storyline for Michigan this year. I'm not sure that whoever takes the first snap is just definitely going to be the guy for every snap. But I do think Alex Orji brings something to the table that the other quarterbacks don't bring, which is just his athletic ability, his running ability. He can throw it down the field, but he's really dangerous as a runner, as we saw in some packages that Michigan ran for him last season. So I think the hope internally is that he takes that job and runs with it. But offensively, it's going to look a lot different for Michigan. They lost 10 starters from that offense last season. Really, Donovan Edwards, Colston Loveland, those are the two names that people are going to know on this offense. Basically, everybody else is new. So that puts Alex Orji in an interesting position if he is the starting quarterback to try to figure out the identity of this offense. The good thing for Michigan is the defense is loaded. I mean, they could potentially be as good or better than they were last season on defense, which is really saying something because that defense last season was the best in the country and really dominant from start to finish.
Yeah, Austin, I did throw a pick 6 to Will Johnson in an online game of CFB 25, so I'm a little sore about it. But how is Michigan reloading like this? You talk about Mason Graham and those guys. How do you lose as much as they did last year on both sides of the ball and still have a defense that does look like it's going to be pretty salty. What do you credit that to?
Yeah, I mean, they've done a really good job in recruiting and evaluation over the last few cycles. Will Johnson was a 5-star recruit. Everybody knew he was going to be really good. Mason Graham was like a 3-star recruit. I mean, he was really under the radar at the time he committed to Michigan, and then he climbed the rankings after that. But he could be a top 5 pick, top 10 pick in the draft. That's a really huge success story in terms of evaluation and development. And Kenneth Grant is another player like that. He was not a big-time recruit. He could be a first-round pick. Michigan has really done a good job of identifying and developing those players on defense, and it's what has allowed them to maintain a really high talent level on defense, even losing some guys like Mike Sainristil, Junior Colson, Chris Jenkins, guys who were real cornerstones of that defense. They still have a really talented group on that side of the ball.
Austin, what's the early read on Jaden Davis? Obviously, he's going to be a true freshman, and I don't know how involved he is in this quarterback battle, but just what's your sense there on the factor he might play?
Yeah, I think the sense from when he got here as an early enrollee is they were really, really happy with him, but they also didn't want to rush him into a competition before he was ready. I think they felt like with Alex Orji and Jack Tuttle, especially when Jack Tuttle got his 7th year and was coming back, there really just wasn't a need to force it with Jaden Davis. But I think this is going to be a redshirt year for him, kind of a apprenticeship year for him. And then depending on how the quarterback competition plays out, I would expect him to be right in the thick of it next year. I mean, I think long-term, the picture for Jaden Davis is really bright. He was, top 100 caliber recruit, one of the best quarterback recruits they've brought in since JJ McCarthy. So I think they have really high hopes for him, but it might be a year or so before we really see him taking meaningful snaps in a game.
Austin, I got one more for you. I came out with my oddly specific predictions today, and I said Michigan is going to win the Joe Moore Award and that Donovan Edwards is going to be the Doak Walker Award winner. Please tell me why I'm not crazy.
Yeah, and that's bold. I mean, I would say that's bold, but like you understood the assignment. Like you got to be bold with that stuff. So I think the offensive line actually, even though they will have 5 new starters, can be pretty close to the level of the offensive lines we've seen at Michigan. Even though it's not a real experienced offensive line, it's an old offensive line, which is really what you want. Like Andrew Gentry, he was on a mission. So he hasn't played much for Michigan, but he's like in his mid-20s. Miles Hinton, same deal. He played a lot at Stanford. And then they have some guys who have been in the program for several years and just didn't play a lot because Michigan had such a veteran core of offensive linemen who were together for so long. And now that those guys have moved on, we're going to see some players like Giovanni El Hadi, who was a big-time recruit at Michigan. He's a senior now, and he just hasn't played a lot, but they think he can be really good. So I think this offensive line will be close to the level of the offensive lines we've seen at Michigan in the past. And then it's just a matter of what can you expect from Donovan Edwards? And I think that's been the question at Michigan really since he got there. He's such a talented player. And there are the games that we look back on, the Ohio State game in 2022, the national championship game last year, where it looks like Donovan Edwards is the best player on the field. Nobody can touch him. And then there have been other games where he just didn't have much of an impact. I know that's been frustrating for him. He's really looking at this season as his opportunity to establish himself as that guy, as one of the best running backs in the country. He certainly has the talent to do that, but he's just got to be able to do it on a consistent basis.
Austin, we appreciate you coming on, and I think it's hard to keep track of the dual scandals, whatever we want to call them, going on at Michigan. The Stallion stuff, I think there's a level of silliness to it, and I think when you talk about the Harbaugh scandal, which sort of has closed that chapter with the cheeseburger, eaten around the world situation. Austin, you had a really good.
It was really good, by the way. I have to say, it's really good.
I was going to ask you about that, like
about
how good it was.
But first of all, what do you make of that situation, which was centered around illegal recruiting during the COVID shutdown? And people can think what they want about that, but there was a very strict shutdown. You couldn't do anything. Schools were doing like virtual scavenger hunts and all that kind of stuff around campuses. But like Tennessee, Arizona State and Michigan were kind of the big three that really broke those rules pretty blatantly. Tell us a little about the story that you wrote, the relevance and the search for the cheeseburger, and how you feel like that's going to affect this program moving forward.
Yeah, I really think that case was like a battle to basically determine what the narrative of it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the one side, you had the narrative that, here's the NCAA again, like it's the cream cheese and the bagels all over again, right? It's the NCAA taking something ridiculously petty and trying to throw the book at somebody over it. And then on the other side, you had the fact that, like you said, like it was a dead period. Like those rules were there for a reason because of COVID-19 pandemic. And if you're going to have rules, like you got to have consequences for programs that break those rules. And you mentioned the schools that got punished for it. Like, Arizona State got punished heavily for that stuff. And Herm Edwards, his reputation took a big hit over that. And it doesn't seem like what happened at Michigan, at least what they documented at Michigan, was not at the same scale of what happened at Arizona State, but it was the same type of stuff. So it wasn't just the cheeseburger. It was the fact that Michigan and Jim Harbaugh were meeting with players during the dead period when that was absolutely not allowed. And so I think it was right that he got punished for it. I think that, the idea that it was just about the cheeseburger was always something that was intended to portray it in a certain light that made Michigan and Jim Harbaugh look better. But then at the end of the day, like it was kind of still about the cheeseburger, like the meaning that really got Jim Harbaugh in trouble was breakfast with a player. And the reason it was so easy to document was because Jim Harbaugh ordered a cheeseburger for breakfast. And like, who else would do that? Nobody would do that.
Well, can I confess something quick, Austin? Can I confess something?
Okay.
I've had a cheeseburger for breakfast 3 times in my life. And it was all 3 days of Bonnaroo in 2006 when we packed a travel grill and some meat.
You did it back to back?
Well, we didn't have any other choice. And that's just like what we brought. We had like stuff in a cooler. And so you couldn't sleep very long because it was so hot inside the tent. So I have eaten a cheeseburger for breakfast on 3 separate occasions, but they were 3 back-to-back days.
That's not. This is not even your craziest food take.
We can't let Austin get off this podcast without asking him what's the best cheeseburger in Ann Arbor. Like, you got to at least tell us who's got the best cheeseburger up there.
Oh man. Well, there's a place called Blimpie Burger in Ann Arbor, which is pretty famous.
Unrelated to the subs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Crazy Jim's Blimpie Burger. It's like a total hole in the wall.
All right.
So that's one of the places you got to go for a cheeseburger. But I gotta say, the Brown Jug cheeseburger, like it was legit. I had the Brown Jug and Benny's. So those were the 2 places: the Brown Jug and Benny's. You have to sample them both for yourself and decide like which one comes out on top. But they were both legit. That was really serious research I was doing in trying both of those burgers. I have to say they were both really good.
I like the confusion over Benny's and Denny's. That was I remember kind of some of that stuff's percolating that people weren't really sure. So I appreciate you getting to the end. If you haven't read Austin's story, you absolutely should. It was fantastic. It's one of the best things we've run on our site in a while, especially from our college football team. So Austin, thank you again for joining us. A link to that story is in the show's description. Let's get to it. Now on to our all sleeper squad. We're going to talk teams first. So Manny, Grace, and I have picked 2 teams and 2 players each, one on offense, one on defense, that we feel are being slept on this year, but are primed for a big season. Let's get right into it. We'll start with the teams first. We're going to alternate. Manny, who are people sleeping on?
I think they're sleeping on UCF. Gus Malzahn has himself a pretty good squad. They weren't too disappointing last year in their first year in the Big 12. They won 6-7. Wasn't great, but he's got a better quarterback now. KJ Jefferson played for a lot of games at Arkansas, started a lot of games. He's back in a familiar offense, a familiar scheme that I think is really going to allow him to flourish. People forget KJ Jefferson was top 10 quarterback 2 years ago in 2022. Went into Florida last year, led them to a win in Gainesville, a very mediocre Arkansas squad. Now he's getting a UCF team with 2 1,400-yard rushers, RJ Harvey, and then Penny Boone, who was the MAC Offensive Player of the Year at Toledo last year, spent a little bit of time at Louisville and then ended up in the portal again. And now they've got 2 1,400-yard rushers. They've got some really good receivers on offense. This is a Gus Malzahn offense. To me, Big 12 is wide open. I think they're a team people are sleeping on.
I like that pick, Manny, because I think the Dan Enos misstep at Arkansas hurt the KJ Jefferson stock in a way that was probably unfair. And people forgot the kind of guy that he was, when Kendall Browse was running that offense there. And I think that it's the Gus Malzahn offense is a really perfect fit for him. I think the Cam Newton comparisons to KJ are a little bit trite and probably not fair. They're very different players, but I do think this offense is a really good fit for KJ and what he can do. I like that pick. I haven't heard a lot of chatter about UCF in the Big 12. It's all Utah's the favorite, Kansas State, Oklahoma State. I might have another Big 12 team that I might want to talk about here shortly. But Grace, who is your sleeper team?
All right, I like that pick too, Manny. My first sleeper team is NC State. Even with all of their quarterback drama last year, they still went 9-4. They've got a super experienced quarterback this year in Grayson McCall coming over from Coastal Carolina. I think they have the best wide receiver in the ACC in Casey Concepcion. That defense is always pretty salty. And the schedule's pretty favorable. We're going to see them obviously open with Tennessee, and they have to play Clemson, which they've kind of gotten over the Clemson hump. But they don't play Florida State. They don't play Miami. They don't play Virginia Tech. I don't think they play Louisville. There's just been a lot of talk about, can Dave Doran finally get over the hump and this team win 10 games? I like it. I just feel like a lot of people have kind of written them off a little bit now that we're talking about Florida State and Clemson again. But this is a team with a really solid quarterback, a good defense, and a schedule that sets up nicely.
I like Tony Gibson a lot, that 3-3-5. He was known as the Baylor killer back in the day. Go back and look at what his defenses at West Virginia did against those high-powered Baylor teams. So that Tennessee Week 2 matchup in Charlotte, that's a little nervy because you look at what Pat Narduzzi did to them, a couple years back when they had Hendon Hooker. That was a little bit scary there too. Manny, I want to get your take on this in a second, but I have a question for you, Grace, because I had North Carolina State on my overrated teams this year. I saw them in the top 25 and I bristled because I compared the Grayson McCall and Jamie Chadwell to sort of Brady and Belichick. And Grayson McCall plays a half a season without Jamie Chadwell. It did not look good last year. And then Jamie Chadwell goes to Liberty and turns Caden Salter into Superman. Why am I wrong here, Grace? Why am I wrong?
I mean, look, remember, NC State had so much drama at the quarterback position last year, right? It starts with Armstrong, then we go to MJ Morris, and then MJ Morris is like, I'm out, I'm not going to do this. And they still kind of quietly won 9 games. And Robert and I is trying to figure out what's happening on a week-to-week basis. I really like his system. I think that we were all curious if it was just going to be, lights out fireworks when he reunited with Brennan Armstrong. And obviously Armstrong kind of had his issues, but I just think that it's a fresh face and it's an experienced guy. He did a lot with a lot of chaos last year. And I think Grayson McCall can handle ACC defenses. I think outside of Clemson, and I don't know what Tennessee's defense looks like. You would probably know better than me on that one, but it's a manageable conference from a defensive perspective, especially for an experienced guy.
Manny, are you taking a shot of espresso or are you going back to bed on the Wolfpack?
I'm buying the Wolfpack, and here's why.
Heck yeah, let's go, Manny.
It's a big loss. Look, Peyton Wilson is a huge loss. He was Butkus Award winner, superstar on that defense, but they've got a system in place, right? So I'm not worried about the defense. And Grace is right. They were missing. They didn't really have a quarterback last year. And look, I got some intel on Grayson McCall. I spoke to him at the ACC kickoff. He considered retiring from football at the end of last season because of a concussion. So why didn't he look good? He was taking some big hits his last year at Coastal Carolina. His wheels aren't the same. He's a little bit different. He's not going to run as much in the NC State offense. But look, a huge pickup. And I got this from just talking to people this week as far as transfer portal arrivals at different schools. They're really high on Jordan Waters, the running back from Duke who came over. And they think he might be the best running back they've had there in 6 or 7 years. They haven't had a 1,000-yard rusher. Casey Concepcion was all over the field for them. Now he's got help. He's got a quarterback. He's got Jordan Waters in the backfield. And oh, by the way, I had somebody else, another personnel guy, say that Ohio State was like furious that they lost Noah Rogers, a top 100 recruit who went back home to North Carolina. He's only a second-year guy, but they're like, you put Rogers and Concepcion together with McCall and Waters, like this NC State offense could all of a sudden blow up and be really, really good. And this is, to me, without question, a dark horse team to win the league.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to give you my first sleeper team. And I thought nobody was talking about these guys, but Justin was blowing up my spot on the Big 12 preview here on my sleeper team. Give me the Iowa State Cyclones. Last year, it looked like it might be a disaster. They had an uncertain quarterback situation. You didn't love any of the options. There's all the noise about the gambling investigation. A year later, things look a lot sunnier. Rocco Becht kind of broke out a year ago. The Cyclones also lead the nation in returning production, according to ESPN's Bill Connolly, a numbers guy. That's 90% of production on offense back, highlighted by running back Abu Sama, who you last saw roaming for 276 yards in the snow against K-State in Snowmageddon. 82% on defense, the super strong front seven. If you've been listening to me long, you know I'm a big continuity guy, and they've got plenty of continuity in the coaching staff, on the field with Iowa State. 4 of their front 7 on that defense had more than 6.5 tackles for loss last year. Nobody's really talking a ton about this team. They didn't show up in the top 25. I think they can contend in a Big 12 that is wide, wide open. Grace, am I crazy? Or are you drinking the Clones Kool-Aid?
I'm maybe drinking the Clones Kool-Aid until the last 2 weeks. I think at Utah and Kansas State to close the regular season is, I don't know. I like it as a sleeper pick, and I think that's what I like about these sleeper picks, right? Is that we're trying to pick people that are genuinely like not super in this playoff conversation. I could see some smooth sailing for the first 10 weeks or so, but I don't know about those last 2 weeks. And then I also don't know, and you might know this, Ubben, just what the situation is with Daniel Jackson, their wide receiver who's out for the year. I don't know who slots in there, but I don't hate it.
I'm so big on the Clones. I'm not even going to talk about why their mascot, who is a cardinal, has teeth. There's a lot of questions there. I've seen a cardinal recently or are familiar with the avian situation. I'm not even going to bring it up. So that's where we're at. Manny, who's your next sleeper?
Well, I don't know why they weren't ranked in the top 25. I mean, they won 10 games a year ago. I thought he did the best job of any coach in the league last year, coming in and making an immediate splash. But Louisville, like, they played in the ACC championship game. I know that they lost quite a bit on offense. Their starting quarterback, their 2 leading rushers, their top receiver. But they still got Ashton Gelati on defense, who's one of the best edge rushers in the country. A lot of those defensive players are back for the Cardinals this year. To me, I think people are sleeping on Louisville in the ACC. They're not giving them a whole lot of credit. Yes, they got a trip to Notre Dame. Yes, they got to host Miami. But I really think they've got some good players. One of them that came in that's getting a lot of hype internally is Ja'Cory Brooks, a former 5-star receiver who signed with Alabama. Alabama, of course, had that big exodus, right? They lost a bunch of guys everywhere after Nick Saban left. Well, it sounds to me from what I'm hearing at Louisville that Ja'Cory Brooks is going to be the next big thing in the conference. Everybody was kind of excited about Colin Lacey. I think it's going to be Ja'Cory Brooks who kind of becomes the breakout star. And they got some good transfers. I mean, you got Don Chaney Jr. in the backfield. Here's a guy who's been injured most of his career at Miami, finally healthy. Tyler Shuck, who won a Pac-12 championship at Oregon with Mario Cristobal. He comes over from Texas Tech. Yes, he hasn't been able to stay healthy, but he's a 7th-year guy. He's a guy who's won in the past, 20 career starts. Like, you replaced a lot of the guys that you lost on offense. And I think ultimately you just look at the job that they did there in their first season. I like Louisville, and I think they're a dark horse team to win the ACC as well.
I like it. Another Cardinal with teeth. I'm going to just let slide. Grace, are you in?
I think it all comes down to Shuck. I mean, he's just had so many injuries in the past, and that's not to say that he won't go off, but it's just such a crucial position. And we saw what Louisville and Jeff Brom did with Jack Plummer last year, and we know that he is capable of bringing in a transfer and lighting people up, but I think we just need to see it. To Manny's point, yes, like, this is a team that, despite winning 10 games last year, playing for the ACC championship, we just really didn't talk about them much. But but I feel like I'm going to need to see their quarterback situation unfold first.
I think I can see it. Grace, who's your second?
I'm not sure if you're going to yell at me for this or not.
I might.
Second one, you might. How about Texas A&M as my second one?
No, I'm in.
Are you in?
Go, Grace.
Are you in?
Go.
All right.
I almost picked them.
All right. Did you almost pick them? All right. Connor Weigman's healthy. They still retain a lot of the talent that Jimbo left them with. They now have a coach who has brought some order and some discipline in the offseason. This defensive line is going to be pretty nasty. And their schedule is pretty favorable. I mean, you've got Notre Dame and Texas, but I'm looking at my notes now. They get Missouri and LSU at home. They avoid Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Oklahoma. I just think they have the talent, and they just needed someone to install a little bit of stability last year. And Mike Elko, I am like buying all the Mike Elko stock. I think if you can win at Duke, you can win anywhere. And I think that he was the perfect hire to reinstate some order around here.
I think there's a lack of like respect for A&M in terms of, well, they lost Jimbo. Well, it's Mike Elko year one. They lost all these. There's this transfer exodus. They're still a pretty good roster. And
they are.
A&M, when the lights are bright, it's not great usually. The lights are dimmed quite a bit here. I think you can kind of sneak in there and we could be sitting here, in mid-November, and A&M's like on the precipice of the playoff if they get it done there late. That's not the craziest thing that I've heard. Manny, where are you at?
Elko said too he had a quiet off season. Like I like that, we didn't hear anything about them this summer. I kind of like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just gonna say Nick Scourton is the big new name for them on defense. Like everybody was talking about everybody they lost, but here's a guy who I think had a great year at Purdue last year. And you talk about Elko, and I mean Duke won 16 games over the last 2 years with Mike Elko in charge. Jimbo won 12 over that same span. So you got a better coach, clearly. You got a guy who's familiar with the system. So I don't think it's crazy. I just think, the SEC is just so loaded. It's going to be hard for them to come out of it. But, they're in the best conference, and maybe they make enough of an argument to make the 12-team field.
Mm-hmm. Good pick, Grace. The Aggies.
Thank you, friend.
Listen, every once in a blue moon, the Aggies might be slightly underrated, and that might be this year. My team... We're gonna go to the G5 here. Everybody wants to argue about, well, Liberty, they should be in there, they should not. Everybody's just assuming Liberty is going to go 13-0 again, which they might. We'll see. Or point to the way that Boise closed the season under Spencer Danielson and him come back. I think we're forgetting a little bit about Memphis in all of this. That's my pick. They bring back Seth Hennigan. They have a tougher schedule than a lot of the competition. There may be, as I mentioned, some buyer's remorse with Liberty. I really think that there will be some real hesitancy from the committee to throw Liberty back in there if they're undefeated. The jewel of Liberty's schedule is probably going to be a road win at App State if they win that game, which is a big if. But if Memphis goes 11-1, they have a close road loss to Florida State. You better look out. This team, Rock Taylor's back. They got a great 1-2 punch at running back. Sutton Smith, Mario Anderson, coming over from South Carolina. He ran for 700 yards last year. Cleared out once Rocket Sanders came in there. There's some concerning losses on the offensive line that I don't love. McCollum Pounders off to Mississippi State. But the pieces are there for a really strong resume. And if they're sitting there, even 10-2 as an AAC champion, they're going to have a shot. So give me Memphis as a real sleeper to get to the playoff and be a team that is not really being talked about as much as they probably should be in the preseason, as one of those teams that's right there. It's all Liberty. It's all Boise. You're hearing a little bit about Fresno at times, but give me Memphis. Give me Memphis.
I'm on board with that. When I did my Audi specific predictions with Chris Vanini a couple weeks ago here on the pod, that was my pick to come out of the G5 level and make the playoff. I think, people maybe aren't giving their defense enough credit either. They've got some good players on that side of the ball. And to me, they're going to be battle tested. Like you play at Florida State, September 14th. Florida, it might be one of those games where they shock FSU. I would not be surprised if they went into Tallahassee and pulled one off there, because the Seminoles got a lot of new faces on offense. DJU at quarterback. Well, I agree. I think Memphis is probably a team they're just not getting enough credit.
Grace, am I on board here? Or am I on the right track here with the Tigers?
I like it. Yeah, look at us agreeing on all these. It's funny that you mentioned them because in the next segment when we do our sleeper players, I was super close to picking Seth Hennigan as one of my sleeper players. Like, I just think he is going to be so exciting to watch. He threw for over 3,800 yards last year. They get a good win against Iowa State in the bowl game. I'm on board. I like it.
He's one of those guys that's like so smart that I would feel super nervous blitzing him because you just feel like you're going to get carved up. Wherever you're coming from, he sees it. Pre-snap, post-snap, great decision maker. I'm a huge Seth Hennigan guy. Those are our 6 sleeper teams for the 2024 season. If there's teams you think we're sleeping on, you have an opportunity to let us know about it. Call the Until Saturday phone line. Leave us a voicemail. That's 316-462-9852. That's 316-462-9852. Leave us a voicemail. We love hearing from you guys. It adds so much to the show. It's time we dig in to our all sleeper squad players. Manny, I'll give you first dibs. Who's your first sleeper player that we're sleeping on?
Well, look, there's so many great transfers in college football, and Bruce Feldman and Sam Kahn and I are going to be coming out with a top 100 list sometime next week of based on the intel that we've gathered here from phone calls. One guy that I think is going to blow up this season is Chris Brazell over at Tennessee, 6'5" wide receiver, redshirt sophomore, was so dynamic at Tulane last year, made like a freshman All-American team. Big target. I know they've got Squirrel White, but Nico's got to throw the ball to somebody. And this dude is big, especially around the end zone. So I could see him putting up huge touchdown numbers and being a star in the SEC and somebody that we're all talking about when he goes into his junior year, a year from now.
It is an interesting group. Brew McCoy coming back from injury. You mentioned Squirrel White. Dante Thornton, there's a lot of hype about him preseason. He didn't really do much. He's had a nice camp from what I've heard around Tennessee. So I'm interested in Brazell. I wasn't sure coming over, but I've heard really good things about him in spring and obviously in camp. So I like that pick, Manny. Some good potential there for a group that they're going to throw it around. I think Nico is due for a big debut year as a first year starter. Grace, who is your first sleeper player?
All right. Sources have told me that you might like my first year sleeper player because I think you've had some success with him on the video game. Byron Brown, USF quarterback.
My guy.
I've heard that you've been lighting people up with the USF offense on this one. But yeah, I mean, his numbers, you look at this guy and I can't believe we haven't been talking about him more. I mean, he was the first player in USF history to pass for 3,000 yards last year. He rushed for 800 more. He's got 12 records at USF. I think he fits into this goalish Tennessee-style offense really well. He's got a little 1,000-yard receiver from last year that he can throw it to. I just really like him. I think he's, we're probably not going to be talking about USF to the extent that we are other teams in the country, but in terms of exciting sleeper quarterbacks, I'm pumped to watch him.
Yeah, it's funny. People, so Sean Atkins is the receiver that you were referencing. He wears number 38. He's a pretty small little dude that just runs around. And people are, always asking, well, why is their best receiver wearing number 38? It's a fair question. But that was just a number. That's the number that he was given when he was a walk-on.
That's awesome.
And now that he's like a world beater, he just kept his number. And that preferred walk-on is now a star, and he's really flourished in Alex Golish's offense. So yes, I have been lighting it up with him. I got to switch my difficulty mode. I'm still on All-American. I got to go up to Heisman. Did I put 100 points on UAB and Trent Dilfer? Who knows? It's possible. I might have done that. Is it my turn? I think it's my turn for a sleeper player.
Yes, it is.
Right. Manny. You want to give Ja'Cory Brooks the love for Louisville. I am a big believer in the guys that move up and have been productive more than the guys who were kind of and moved down a level. So you want Ja'Cory Brooks? Give me Colin Lacey at Louisville. There's no Jamari Thrash. We talked about Tyler Shuckin from Texas Tech. They've got to have that number one target. I'm going to go with Lacey. He comes from South Alabama. He caught 156 balls for more than 2,100 yards the last 2 seasons for the Jags. And for me, it's the consistency, and it is thriving in big games. He had 800-yard games, including one against James Madison. He had a 100-yard, 2-score game, and a win over Oklahoma State. And last year, he had 2 more games with at least 89 yards. And you know how many times he was held under 6 catches last year? Any guesses?
Once?
One time in that Oklahoma State game, which his team won by 26 points. The guy is a production
He's
machine.
productive.
And Jeff Brom, I'm a huge believer in. He's had receivers who can absolutely explode. Charlie Jones, 110 catches, 1,300 yards in 2022. David Bell had a lot of injuries, but a year earlier, he had almost 1,300 yards. Rondell White thrived in that offense. He had almost 1,300 yards. The pieces are there for a massive, massive year for Colin Lacey to make some money, get his name out there. And this just comes down to, from what I've seen, I like the guys who have had a ton of production and move up a lot more than like the big athletes. And Ja'Cory Brooks had an okay career at Alabama, but I'm a big believer in the guys that are blowing up from the lower levels, coming up slightly, especially from the G5, which is not that far. And we've seen him thrive against those teams like Oklahoma State and James Madison. Manny, have I changed your mind?
No, I listen, he's been productive. You can't argue against production, but I will tell you, I had a conversation with somebody this week who told me that he has been very average in camp. Not necessarily that he's, not productive or not going to be productive, but there's a reason why I kept hearing about Ja'Cory Brooks. So I think Brooks might be the star. I think Lacey might be Mr. Consistency and productive. I'm not saying he won't put up numbers. There's just a reason I ended up saying what I said about Ja'Cory Brooks and what I'm hearing.
Fair enough. Grace, where are you at on this?
I mean, when you look at the numbers in the production in the Sun Belt, I'm Team Ubben, but now I don't know if Manny's got some intel. I'm like, I think it'll just be so interesting to see how he takes the next step up to obviously going to the Power 4 now. That feels so weird to say that still, Power 4. But yes, I would like to see. I think I'm just kind of in wait and see mode too, in terms of preseason camp is hard to tell kind of what's happening, but when a star is a star in camp, you kind of know. So I think I'm more in wait and see, but his numbers are hard to deny for sure.
You know who else had a really bad camp and lost a job was Hendon Hooker at Tennessee in 2021.
That's fair.
He did okay.
That's fair. That's fair.
Turn the lights on, baby. Turn the lights on. It's going to be time. Manny, who is your next sleeper?
All right. I'm going with somebody that, he's on one of my sleeper teams, but UCF's defense was not very good last year, and they really, really struggled. And when I spoke to somebody this week about the changes at UCF, the first name out of their mouth was Deshaun Pace. And maybe he's not a sleeper because he was 7th in the Big 12 in tackles last year, but I don't know how many people actually even heard of Deshaun Pace because Cincinnati was just so bad. Now he's at UCF. He's on a team that potentially could be a dark horse to win the Big 12. He plays so many different positions. They've got him at the star. They can line him up at cornerback at times. They'll put him at safety. 80 tackles last season, 11 tackles for loss, a forced fumble, an interception, 5 pass breakups in 11 games. I think this is a guy, 6'2", 212, that could just sort of really blossom on a team that is going to be, I think, better than most people are giving him credit for. And when they say, man, why is UCF so good? I think they're going to say because Deshaun Pace is a beast on defense.
I think it's really interesting, this transfer portal era. I don't love it, but there's a lot of pieces where you have guys that are really productive moving around. Like, I think it's a slight step up, but I think it's mostly a lateral move. Going from Cincinnati, and it's a big chemistry experiment in some ways that I find very interesting to see where guys fit in different systems, guys that flourish in some systems after being kind of previously. The lateral move guys especially are very interesting. I think that could be a big, big piece for UCF. Grace, who is your next sleeper?
My next sleeper is, well, he's on our All-American list, but I think he's maybe the one person no one has heard of. Jason Henderson at ODU. This is a guy who I think is probably going to finish with 600 plus career tackles and break the NCAA record. I think he could have gone anywhere in the transfer portal. He has stayed at ODU this entire time. He led the country in tackles last year, 14.2 tackles per game. He had 22 tackles last year against Coastal Carolina. We're going to get to see him show out they play South Carolina to open their season. They play Virginia Tech. So he's going to get a little bit of TV love. This is a dude that I think that any program in the country would have wanted out of the portal, but he just stayed put. He likes ODU. He said it kind of wasn't worth the risk for him. And I think he's on pace to break some records.
Grace, did you see the semi-viral clip from Split Zone Duo today?
No, I haven't been on Twitter all day.
No. Okay. There's a Jason Henderson truther movement.
Okay.
That is burgeoning on the internet. I guess led by the Split Zone Duo fellows, that his home and road splits with tackles are very suspect.
Are they? Give me the numbers.
I don't have the numbers offhand, but essentially there are some allegations of book cooking from the Old Dominion home stat keepers. I'm very intrigued. I've heard a lot of good things about him. I think he's a really good player, but I love this sort of stuff. And
is there a discrepancy between them and PFF or CFB stats?
No, I don't know.
I got the numbers. I got the numbers. You want me to share them?
All right, give them to us.
Please share them, Manny.
91 tackles at home. This is according to CFB stats. Okay, these are the splits. 91 tackles at home, 79 on the road or neutral site. And those were in 6 games each, 6 at home, 6 away. So it's not that, I don't know what numbers they're sharing, but as far as 2023 is concerned, I mean, it looked pretty balanced to me.
It's the assists that I think that there's a lot of questions. We'll see. I've only seen briefly. I've been able to listen to that entire show. But it's an interesting pick. It's a good pick. I think he's a guy that will be really, really interesting. My pick, Tacario Davis at Arizona. Everybody wants to talk offense at Arizona. And I get why. Noah Fafita is really exciting. Tetaroa McMillan coming back, even without Jacob Cowing. Brent Brennan, the offensive coach, coming in. It's all about the offense, Everyone's talking about, we're going to, avenge Jed Fish leaving and all that stuff. But the Cats can play a little defense too. Davis is a big reason for that. Pro Football Focus graded him out. One of the best returning cornerbacks in the sport. Had 15 PBUs last year. He's kind of a weird frame, a big body. You don't see a lot of 6'4" corners out there. So for a program that is all the talk about them is about offense. How about a little defense? The Wildcats, Tacario Davis, cornerback. Grace, are you in on the Cats defense? Getting a little love.
I got no qualms with that. I mean, I have no beef with that pick. I think you're going to need a nice lockdown corner in the transition to the Big 12. So why not? Go for it. I like it.
All right. I'm in. Go ahead. Manny, what do you think?
Well, I was going to say, as we're sitting here going over most of our picks for sleeper players and sleeper teams, you notice a lot of it is ACC Big 12. I don't know if you've noticed that, but it's a lot of ACC Big 12 selections. I think those are the conferences where you might see guys surprise, right, and come out of nowhere. It feels like the Big 10 and SEC, there's probably fewer surprises out there. Just my opinion.
I think that's an interesting point because neither of those leagues are lacking for love. The SEC has the reputation. The Big 10 has the TV audiences and, Notre Dame adjacent, Notre Dame quasi-scheduling agreement, all of that stuff that factors in. It's interesting. I think it might be this way for a while, that we're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing. With that said, let's go on to the Heisman Draft. It's become a tradition at The Athletic for us to draft Heisman candidates. We usually get it wrong, except for me. I've picked the top 4, I think, every single year in every single pick that I've had. So Manny and I had the 8th and 2nd picks, respectively. It's a snake draft. We're going to link to that draft in the description. And this is probably the hardest year that we've had because there's a couple guys that you feel pretty good about, but then it just feels like blindfold dartboard. I asked one of our editors if I could pick just the field. Everyone that's not picked, I was told in no certain terms that was illegal, but I think we have not picked the Heisman winner in close to half of the years. I think something like that.
Wow.
So it's the Heisman is an unpredictable thing, especially in preseason. So we can look at that fully, but Grace, I'm going to give you my team.
Okay.
I will give you Manny's team. And we're going to let you be the arbiter of who has the better team here. And I think it's me.
2-8. That's rough. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah,
that's hard.
It's not great.
It's a snake draft, though. It's a snake draft.
All right.
I thought with the second pick, I could get Carson Beck. I was wrong. I had to settle for Dylan Gabriel. I would have taken Beck. With my second pick, I got Garrett Nussmeier. My third pick, I got Miller Moss at USC. And then with my final pick, I got Caden Salter. I went QBs across the board. Manny got Riley Leonard with his first pick. Will Howard with his second pick on that wraparound. Noah Fafita with his third pick. And Kyron Drones. A lot of buzz for him in preseason with his last pick. We have 8 QBs. Grace, why is my team better than Manny's?
Okay, I'll say this. I think Ubben is obviously more likely to have the winner, but I do like Manny's depth. I think he was smart with when that snake came back around. I think you made some
We're not loving Caden Salter getting invited to New York City. Come on now.
I mean, but if everyone's hating on Liberty, I don't know. I mean, you're right. Jamie Chadwell's offense is awesome and exciting and fun and set up perfectly for a QB. But if we're having a collective, railing on Liberty because their schedule is so soft, what's the PR pitch there? But
yeah,
I don't know. I like Dylan Gabriel.
Outside of our two teams, whose team did you like?
Whose do I like?
Yes. Again, if you haven't, you can read this the full thing on our site and see all the picks. But whose team stood out to you as a team that you're in on?
I actually really like Seth Emerson's team. Luther Burden with his first pick, Mecca Egbuka with his second, Brady Cook with his third. Like, those are 3 deep, solid picks, and it looks like he picked third.
He's got James Pierce as his last.
James Pierce is his last pick.
He was number 1 on ESPN's top 100 players. So that's interesting.
You know what? I like Sam's draft too. Quinn, Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State. I don't know. There's some good ones here. Travis Hunter. Avery Johnson.
I think ultimately we're gonna see a situation where somebody that we're not talking about.
I think it's possible someone in round 2 is the winner.
Possibly.
I think Travis Hunter win the Heisman.
I think
you think he's going to win the Heisman?
I would also vote Travis Hunter today.
I think he's going to win the Heisman. I think Colorado's going to win at least 8 games. And I think just because NFL teams are going to be salivating over him so much and just his talent to be able to do it on both sides of the ball. Like in sports, we've fallen in love with, especially in baseball, I'm forgetting his name now, but who plays for the Dodgers. Shohei Ohtani, just like being able to play multiple positions. Like I think Travis Hunter is going to capture the country's attention just because he can do it both sides of the ball. And I think that
people love that. People love the novelty of the two-way. And I don't say that as pejorative. I mean, he's really good at both sides of the ball. A little bit overrated in coverage, but a really good receiver and a crazy athlete. His football IQ is like insane. Both the picks that he had last year, like it's like that Zach Galifianakis gif of the calculations, like the things you can see happening in his head. And his willingness to like cheat on his coverage and outsmart a quarterback is wild. I still have questions about, there's a reason why he missed time last year. It's really hard to play that many snaps and stay effective and stay healthy. I'm skeptical, but I think if he can stay healthy in Colorado, keeps it together, wins, 7-8 games, I think he'll be in the mix. This draft really, the temperature turned up on this draft, Grace, when our colleague Bruce Feldman grabbed Jeremiah Smith and Dylan Raiola. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that?
Oh my gosh, I'm looking at this now, 3rd and 4th. I mean,
you got him on the wraparound.
I don't hate it. I mean, do I think we're going to see a true freshman win the Heisman? No. Do I think if in any alternate universe we were to see a true freshman win a Heisman, it'd be one of these 2 guys? Probably. So I don't hate it.
He might be the most hyped freshman since Caleb Downs in 2023. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of love for him out there. I think he's going to be a really, really good player, but I think there's too many mouths to feed in that Ohio State offense. And I think most likely, if I'm going to have to pick one guy to get that New York City invite, it's going to be Will Howard, just for being able to spread it around.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And I think with the backs, those guys are going to split time, but he might throw to them a little bit. So we'll see. So you like the Luther Burden pick at 3rd overall, Grace?
I actually kind of do. What was the reaction to that amongst y'all? I like it.
I mean, I was surprised. He you got to be bold. And I think that group of receivers is really good. There's a lot of pieces on that group of receivers that are going to prevent teams from just throwing 3 defenders at him, because Brady Cook is really experienced. They have a lot of really good bodies in that offensive unit that are going to allow Luther to shine. And he really had a breakout year last year. So I think he can be there. I just think, what Devontae Smith did in 2020 was so special.
That's fair.
That I still am like, and I've been in many arguments about this. I still disagree that wide receivers have that acute an impact on your win-loss. The touches are too minimal compared to a running back, compared to a quarterback. So I am very skeptical that voters will buy in on Luther Burden, but maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. Maybe sometimes. I don't know. Any snubs? We Tetaroa McMillan was one that stood out. Yeah. That the people. Any other snubs that stand out to you guys that we should be getting yelled at?
I thought we did a pretty good job covering the best players in college football, right? At least the ones that we think will be the best players. I don't think we really missed other than McMillan. I had
second to last pick, so I felt good about grabbing Salter right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Byron Brown pick was smart, especially if USF is the G5 rep. I mean, I think he'll be the most sought after player in the transfer portal after this coming season if he doesn't go pro. So I think
that's not very nice.
I mean, I hate to do that to Alex Golish, but it's like, I mean, if he has a huge year at USF, like what kind of money are Alabama and Georgia and everybody else going to throw at him to get in the portal and go play for them? So
just for the record, in my CFB dynasty, I did keep him out of the portal. I'm just going to say that.
You did. You managed that.
Well, are his real life numbers or your dynasty numbers with him? Which ones are bigger?
I spread it around. I like to run the ball. They got some nice backs, but he's so what happened was, so I made it to the first year, and then I accidentally simmed my season opener and lost to Clemson by 40 in year 2. So I just restarted the whole dynasty. So I'm replaying 2023 with them, but they're very fun. I was texting some people on USF staff and letting them know that I love their team and that Jalen Shuler might win a bunch of defensive awards based on what I've seen in the game. So,
on your simulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, we'll see. Grace, we got to get to the big news. You're back on the show. Mm-hmm. You are in the throes of wedded bliss, a new stage in your life. First of all, we're supposed to give you props for not holding a wedding in the fall. I got married in March, not this March like 11 years ago. So it's a good time of the year to do it. Manny, when did you
get married, Manny?
I was mid-July.
Okay. Were you just trying to get out of media days or
Yeah, actually I was like trying to make sure that I would miss like, the kickoff and I did, thankfully. It was a nice little break.
So Grace, how's it going?
Hilarious. You
went to Asia on your honeymoon. Hit us with the highlights so far.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, that picture. Yes. So we went to Asia. I literally look like a corpse in this picture. We started in Thailand, and it was like the most beautiful, magical place I've ever been. We went to an elephant sanctuary. Like everything about Thailand was beyond my wildest dreams. And then we went to the Maldives, and I am not a fan of underwater creatures, ocean life. It's just not really my thing. But you go to the Maldives and they're like, well, this is the #1 scuba destination in the whole world. And I'm like, well, I'm probably never going to be back here. We're in the middle of nowhere in the Indian Ocean. I guess I should try it. And so I got bamboozled by the instructor into giving it a go. And we went scuba diving, and we saw some sharks. We saw some rays. We saw an awesome sea turtle. And nice. I'm glad I did it. I don't know that I'll do it again, but it was. So
Grace, you're not a scuba person. This is a one-off.
Well, the instructor was like, I think he thought he was comforting me, and he was like, "Do you get claustrophobic?" And I do. And he was not expecting me to say yes. And so when I was like, yes, I do. He was like, oh, well, then this will be perfect for you. And I was like, this is such a lie, because you get under there and you put you're breathing underwater, and I had like I'm like a pro at freaking out on land, but having a little panic attack underwater is a out of body experience. And it just takes you a while to like get used to the breathing and convince your brain that you are okay. And like, it's just such a mind twist to be like, I can breathe. I am okay.
Interesting.
But our instructor, like, he quite literally held my hand throughout the whole dive. And once you get used to it, it was pretty cool. And I was glad I did it.
Grace, I'm a big pad thai person. How would you say it compares in Thailand to the place in the strip mall 5 minutes from my house?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, it's like $1 in Thailand, which is awesome. Like the best.
Not $1 here, unfortunately. It's many
it's
times
like 15
more than $1. Yes.
I mean, like the best lunch we had in Thailand, literally our entire bill was $4.80.
Wow. When are you guys moving there?
Seriously, I know. The best pad thai we had, we took a cooking class, and the instructor needed someone to use as a guinea pig to demonstrate. And I've never seen Hunt's hand shoot up faster to participate in anything in my life. And so he made this like incredible pad thai because she basically like walked through every step to demonstrate. But it was legit. I mean, we went to like the market and got a bunch of fresh ingredients. We went to her garden, and American Thai food is good, but it's on a different level over there for sure.
That's good to know. I always like feel bad when there's international cuisines that we just change and Americanize, like Cantonese Chinese food versus like mall food court Chinese food. Like
Fair.
Crab rangoon is not a real thing. It's delicious. One of my favorite foods, but it's this should probably not exist a little bit. It's a little bit like
I think we have of like all the American Thai dishes. I do think we have pad Thai down probably the best, but the best dish I had was like one I had never heard of that we don't make over here.
Well, why not?
I don't know. We should. It was called cow soy, and it was like noodles and like a yellow curry sauce with like fried noodles on top. Like the broth was awesome.
Interesting.
So we got to figure that out over here.
Well, it's time for crunch time. Some news and notes to get you out of here and catch you up on what's going on in college football. First of all, Grace, I have some bad news from your neck of the woods. I have wondered this for a long time, that these millionaire coaches and all the things, the ways that they're insulated from society in a million different ways, and yet I would say the majority of them take calls on their radio show that they have as part of their contract. But it appears that Clemson's radio show, in the wake of the Tyler from Spartanburg nuclear bomb / trutherism of whether or not Tyler actually exists, but it appears he does exist.
He does. He DM'd me. We've chatted. He is a real person. Apparently,
live call-ins may be over, according to Chapel Fowler on Twitter. I'm sad. I can't believe that the coaches didn't figure out 10 years ago that you don't have to do this. You can just pal around with the radio guy on the radio for like an hour and people will be fine with it. Grace, how do you feel about the end of call-ins?
I'm sad. Look, every call-in show is unhinged, but the level of unhinged that Clemson's reached last year was incredible content. And my guess is that they were probably moving in this direction anyway. And I don't know that it was solely because of Tyler. Maybe Tyler was more of the cherry on top situation, but Dabo Sweeney's call-in show has been just elite entertainment. So I am very, very sad that we no longer have that.
Yeah. Well, it's been a bad camp to be a Texas running back. Christian Clark out for the season after tearing his Achilles. CJ Baxter already out for the year with a knee injury. Savion Red transferred out. We already knew it was going to kind of be the Jaden Blue show. Appears even more so. They obviously already lost Jonathan Brooks to the NFL. So Texas, they've had on the short list of maybe one of the worst camps you can have because injuries are kind of all that matter. And they're having injuries at some pretty key spots. The Notre Dame Hard Knocks-esque series featuring septuagenarian and Ryan Day hater Lou Holtz in a cameo. That series will air August 29th. I don't know how revealing it's going to be, but I probably will watch some of it. I did buy Peacock for college football and the Olympics, so I'll probably tune into that. 1 to 10, Manny, are you in on the Notre Dame Hard Knocks-ish show?
I'm in for all the Hard Knocks stuff. I want more of the behind the scenes looks. By the way, I'm not sure who Texas fans pissed off, but what about Minnesota Vikings fans? Like, did they?
Yeah, that's tough.
I don't know who's had a worse camp, but both of them are just hurting right now.
I don't know what the update on Jordan Addison was, but it didn't sound. When there's a cart in camp, that's never good. I think the Hard Knocks thing is just like there's a lot of shows that are good at seeming like Hard Knocks. But I want more Last Chance U in my life where like it's real, where there's some elements of real with some of this, but it's the team is still signing off on that. Troy, Jared Parker, they have a new starting quarterback, Goose Crowder. Now, I love the name, of course, the West Virginia transfer, but his real name is Will. Do we count this? It's obviously one of the best names in the sport. Are we going to give him Goose?
I'm hoping, is Fish McWilliams still playing? Because I'd love to see a Fish McWilliams sack of Goose Crowder. Like we need.
Traditionally, that goes the other way. It's the goose that's terrorizing the fish.
Right, but a little reverse animal cruelty here. I mean, that would make for some good college football television.
Well, listen, if anybody wants to really distract him, I have to wonder if there's going to be little pieces of bread that people will throw out onto the field and see if he can get distracted. We'll see. It's a great name, and we'll see if he can make things happen at Troy after John Summerall left for Tulane. Please follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Overcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review, all those things. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're closing in on 10,000 subscribers there. The link to our channel is in the show description. And of course, give the phone line a ring. We love to hear voicemails from you guys. It adds so much to the show. We're going to be doing a lot of that this year. We got a lot of things cooking for you guys. I am back off of paternity leave. I am full-time again. Give that phone line a ring. Leave us a voicemail. 316-462-9852. What did we get wrong? Why are we geniuses? Who are we sleeping on? And vote on today's Spotify poll. We have questions in there every episode. So thanks for tuning in. This show would not be possible without you. For Manny Navarro, Grace Raynor, and Austin Meek from earlier in the show, I'm David Ubben. We will check you next week. And of course, bring back the turnover chain. Manny, get to work on that. Thanks, guys.